It seems that the PCAC is really the main um, thing that you all are, your main suggestion for the town is to establish this. Is that correct?
Okay. Yeah, but let me just mention a few other things. First of all, so towards the end of our work, we learned about a survey done of the police department in Newton. And we said, hey, that's a great idea. Why didn't we think about this before? But we didn't. But we did a survey, and the results of that survey we're going to present to the select board at a future time. But the return rate was like 56% of the officers, which is a huge return rate. So we got a lot of information, a lot of eye-opening comments from them about the town, about working in the police department, about the issues that we're concerned with. So we're analyzing that, and we'll do a report. The second thing is that let's see. Matter of fact, Elizabeth's one of Elizabeth's subcommittees is recommending that the town leave the civil service system, and there's a process for doing that because of problems that being in civil service creates with respect to diversity hiring, among other things. And then the hot issue in town is the issue of the school resource officers at the high school and some of the elementary schools, and the walk and talk unit at Brookline Housing Authority facilities. So, our committee recommends that they remain as is with some changes. We incorporated some of the ideas from the task force into our recommendations with respect to, how those programs should go forward. But the task force position is that those programs should end. So we have a little dispute here that is not easily resolved. My thinking is that this is something that's going to require a little more work before any decision is made by that. I mean, for example, the school committee and the Brookline Housing Authority need to weigh in. What are their views? The select board as police commissioners need to ultimately make the decision, but resolving that issue is going to take a while. And finally, also something that Elizabeth's subcommittee worked on is the issue of police morale. We have a big morale problem in this town with police, and that's really bad. We spent all these years really turning the Brookline Police Department into a progressive police force, and now they feel under attack, and the morale is an issue. Now that's important. I mean, some people denigrate our concern of this, but that's important because if the officers that we have trained and have begun to acculturate into our progressive sort of community ethos are leaving, who's going to replace them? Where does that road take us down? So this is a serious problem that we have some recommendations for, and another issue that we've addressed in our report.
I just wanted to say that the points of contention that the reform committee has with the task force about what to do with the school resource officers and the walk and talk programs, I've heard it characterized as each side thinking the other is unreasonable, and I actually feel we need to kind of a fruitful discussion and resolution is going to require digging deeper into the reasons why people think one side or other is unreasonable. My impression is that people on the reform committee have felt that the police officers are trying to do a positive job make a positive contribution to the community in the context of those programs, and people who think the program should end say, well, there are two kinds. There are those who say, even if they've been trying to do a good job, the fact of the matter is, from their point of view, that they haven't been able to make the connections that would be needed for it to be a good job for various kinds of historical and reasons, and therefore it should be replaced with something else. And then and I also believe that there are those people who are so intrinsically distrustful of police that they can't imagine that the police could ever be trusted to really have positive motives in mind. Those are two different points of view, but both kind of exist out there. And so we have to kind of discuss those kinds of roots of perceptions about who the police are and what they are capable of doing in principle in order to get past that, as opposed to just kind of having rigid positions about that. And I think that's going to be kind of painful because many people feel very passionately about viewing police one way or the other. So I just wanted to mention that.
Two thoughts, and I'm going to go to you, Bernard. Just what you just said, that I think is important, and one, for the community to know from the police department that if some other police officer does something that's reprehensible or wrong, I don't mean just made a mistake with the light in their face and didn't know that, I mean actually did something that's just not something that we want a police officer to do, or a way that they should treat people, that they don't stand with those officers. Right. That they're not this tight-knit group. That you want them to be a tight-knit group, but not to the point where they're going to protect people who are doing the wrong thing. That's supposed to be what the mob does, when they protect each other. And also that there's a way back for people. That I always feel that there's, when we're talking about intolerance, that, a lot of people won't admit to their intolerance, especially in a future time, a past time in their life, because we hang them for it and there's no way back. There's no way to redemption. There's no way to make amends. There's no way to be a better person. And so that, I believe, results in people not admitting to what they did, or lying about what they did, or not being honest about what they did, because they feel, I got 4 kids. I can't tell the truth, because, I provide for my family, and we won't be able to pay our bills, if I'm honest. And so we don't praise honesty enough. We only denigrate people for not doing the right thing instead of praising them as well, and for doing the right thing.
You have to believe that people can change, and change for the better.
Right.
That's the other side. There's room for forgiveness and change, right? Yeah. Right. One little thing we didn't mention, Harvey, it's tiny, but it actually was Bernard's idea, and he was smart about it. He said, in the swearing in oath for our police officers, they should swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States as well. And that is so that people don't join in on other stuff. We're all in this together. And it's a very small thing to do, but it actually, the symbolism of it and the meaning of it. And I think Bernard was one of the officers who suggested that we do it not only when they sign in as new officers, but also when they're promoted. So the
that was Chief Morgan who suggested that.
Chief Morgan suggested that. Yeah, that it was what are we in this for? We're in this because we're a community.
Right.
We're a community that has to live and work together, and we have to be safe.
And really appreciate how high a bar that is. Yes. Most of us, I work for myself, but most people work in companies, and there's a loyalty to that company, and there's a loyalty to your fellow employees. It's a natural instinct, herd instinct, to be loyal to each other, and that, you know, to be loyal to the Constitution above your fellow officers, and to truth and to justice. That's a higher bar, and we need to appreciate that that's a high bar. And when they show that, demonstrate that, you know, applaud them for doing that, because it's that's tough to do. You know, an officer who does something like that may not be appreciated by his fellow officers. And
Trust is big. Um, and trust between, first of all, there's trust between the Reform Committee and the task force. I find that there is a certain amount of distrust there that we have to work through if we want to move forward. But then trust between various segments of the community and the police department. It's very important. I mean, Elizabeth talked about, look, it's our police department. We have to work together to do better. I know that there are segments of the community who live in Brookline, but do not perceive that it is their police department. It is the police department of the people with power, mostly white, wealthy people. And there are people who, you know, are minorities, don't have the financial resources, don't have the education, and they perceive that the world acts on them, not that they are agents with sufficient power to act. And it is very difficult for someone in that position to trust that when they speak up, they'll be heard. We've even talked about how someone privileged can be concerned about speaking up and being heard. And establishing that kind of trust, it just, you know, it ain't easy. It's going to take time, and it has to be real. You know, it's a heavy lift, and it's going to take investment. And in some ways, this thing about reform versus reimagining the police is just kind of it's a societal thing, and this is just the current focal point. It's a very important focal point, but it's there. One of the reasons why I talk about this, and I know Bernard even kind of wanted me to mention, I mean, I'm an active member of my church. It's Unitarian Church. It's First Parish in Brookline. And we have a strong social justice component, you know, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, immigration justice. And we care about things like this. And we care about it from the point of view of what we even call beloved community, but it's just building a beloved community, a community where everybody feels safe, supported, safe, supported, and has the ability to thrive. We're not there as society, but that's something we believe in striving to make happen. And so my reason for, and my wife's reason for getting involved with this kind of work is to help push those ideals, that quest forward. And that's where we are. And to some extent, it makes me feel that one of the things I need to be is a bridge builder, because I can identify with people on both sides for lots of different reasons, including the fact that I am a Black male in the United States, but I also happen to be, at this particular point in my life, socioeconomically more with the majority of the town, quite frankly. So, and also because in the course of growing up, I was, you know, I spent 10 years of my childhood in public housing in the Bronx. We were poor, and I'm in a different place right now, but I can really kind of identify with people from both sides because I've been on both sides. I feel sometimes you need to be a bridge builder for that reason. Also, being over 70 years old, I've seen how a lot of things have gone down in the past 50 years. That history is important. And I feel that people who are, say, under 40 don't have a good feel for how things have evolved in that time. And I think that's important. So.
Yeah.
I
join you in the your age category, and yes, the history over the last 6 decades, I think, you know, tells us a lot about, among other things, the ebbs and flows of justice. But I'd like to sort of wrap up, you know, at least my thinking by first noting that you talked about intervention in police behavior that's inappropriate by other police officers. Just your audience should know that the Brookline Police Department just got a grant to actually train and go through simulations of how you intervene as a bystander when one of your fellow officers is doing something wrong. And I think that that's been the sort of ethos for a long time. I talked to one of the Black officers here in town, and he said that the difference between Brookline and, let's say, Boston is that we're small enough so that everyone knows everyone, and that there's an ethos that if you see someone doing something, it's not that you're attacking them. Rather, you say, hey, it's a better way to do this than that. So, I think that that's, one thing that's great about Brookline Police Department. But the other thing, not the other thing, but an additional issue is the fact that there's now legislation in the state requiring that type of training and requiring officers to intervene if they see another officer behaving in a bad way. I'd like to also, we're talking about policing as if the policing problem is sort of a problem by itself. It's not. For example, I can't guarantee that all the work we do is going to prevent the possibility of a bad situation in the future. I cannot guarantee that. No one can. But I can't guarantee that the teachers in our schools are not going to commit some type of abuse of a child. I can't guarantee that a restaurant worker won't wash their hands and cause illness. I can't guarantee that a priest in a church won't abuse the acolytes. But what we can do and what we must do is to make sure that we do the training, do the teaching, and set up procedures so that we minimize the risk. And I think that if people want us to guarantee that, for example, which came up recently, guarantee that Philando Castile will not happen here in Brookline, it's very unlikely. But no one can say it's not. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee on anything that we've reduced the probability as close to zero as possible. And I think that's something that people really have to realize or acknowledge and help us to increasingly or to increase the reduction of that probability even below zero. So
I wanted to point out a couple of things from our conversation. One I think is really important. One of us, not me, but one of us said that Brookline isn't that diverse, but actually Brookline is extremely diverse, diverse in terms of percentage of people who are wealthy, percentage of people who are very poor, and percentage of immigrants. I believe Brookline High School is 59% Caucasian. There's a large Asian population, but there's also we've got people from all over the world, and you've got a large population of immigrants whose parents are doctors at MGH or professors at a local university, and also immigrants who live in public housing, whose parents work minimum wage jobs. It's and sometimes it's the same group. It's there are Chinese immigrants who are like all up and down the economic scale in Brookline, and also we are in this as a progressive community, as a that tries to work together, that tries to have its best ideals. Any criticism of Brookline police chief, I think we can all agree he bears no resemblance to the police chief in Selma in 1962, and also that sometimes we just focus our attention on Brookline government and not on all of Brookline. And a lot of that is because there's such a high percentage of officers trying to do the right thing, business owners trying to do the right thing, but because business owners in Brookline do the right thing, doesn't mean that people have negative interactions inside of Brookline businesses, and that racism doesn't happen inside of Brookline businesses, because it happens everywhere in the world. And that there's a tendency to want to cover it up because of the, or not cover it up, but not address it because of this high percentage of people who we perceive as doing the right things. And so everything becomes so nuanced, that, and we're so diverse, and we don't even know about our own diversity. Like,
Yeah.
so many people in Brookline, we try to raise money for underrepresented people and teenagers, and people say, why would I want to raise money for some rich kids? And
Yeah.
they don't realize these kids aren't
Not
rich.
everyone. Yeah.
Kids are dirt poor, and they live in your community.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we do need to look at, the diversity we have in Brookline. For example, I think more than half the residents are renters. So that's the type of diversity that is interesting and gives us a lot of opportunity. 17%, I think, are Asian. That's South Asian, of course, and East Asian. And that's a community that we need to incorporate into civic affairs a lot more. And we need to mourn with them when atrocities like happened in Atlanta happen, because as I said at the select board on Thursday at our special meeting, a injury against one part of the community is an injury against all of our communities, and we need to stick together on when that happens. But I also want to sort of push back a little bit on this diversity issue. We have a lot of diversity, but the historical racism that has resulted in the diversity of Black and Hispanic families being so low is really the important diversity that has to be addressed. And I'm trying to do what I can, not just in terms of affordable housing, because that's sort of an assumption that all Black people are in need of affordable housing. And I'm not, I don't consider myself wealthy or anything, but I'm middle class. Ron is middle class, and it's people like us that we need to also work to attract to move to Brookline. Why are people moving out of Roxbury, for example, into suburbs like Milton and Randolph and Lexington, places like that, when we're right here in the middle of everything, direct lines into downtown Boston, direct bus lines into Nubian Square and Harvard Square. So, diversity, I think we need to look at in terms of Black and Hispanic families, especially. Not discounting the importance of other diversities we have, but looking at the history of America and of Boston. I think that is what we really need to make sure we don't forget.
That's a really
fun.
great point, Bernard. I was sort of thinking of it also in terms of we've done about 600 youth award interviews in the last 11 years, and I've had a couple of different editors, and one of the editors that I use for my films is edited mostly documentaries on PBS, and he does Frontline and things like that, and he told me that he could teach a class on color correction to editors from doing the youth award interviews, because we basically have almost every shade of human being on the spectrum. So do you want to give a last word, Bernard or Ron, or should we just say goodbye?
I don't know. You want to say something, Ron?
I'm just going to say that I really, really, really value this opportunity to share where we're coming from, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how our segment and also the Raoul segment is aired, because I think the reports of the two groups is the beginning of where we are, not the end. And I'm really kind of looking forward to robust engagement to move us forward. And so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'll send you Raul's interview. It's already on cable and online, but I'll get it right to you. Thank you both for coming on, and to Michael Zoorob and Dr. Elizabeth Childs for also being here with us. We'll see you next week on Brookline Hub in depth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danielle Myers of ADW Video Productions and BrooklineHub.com. BrooklineHub.com is a 501c3 nonprofit online publication dedicated to community building through local reporting and events. Brookline Facing Civil Rights was produced by our founder, Harvey Bravman. The film is about the experiences of African Americans who helped break the wall of segregation that existed in Brookline before the civil rights laws were passed in the 1960s. Last year, the film sold out the Coolidge Corner Theater and included a panel discussion on inclusivity. You can stream the film and the discussion on BrooklineHub.com in exchange for a donation to the Brookline Community Foundation's Safety Net Fund. You can also stream Soul Witness, a film that features interviews with Brookline Holocaust survivors conducted 30 years ago, on soulwitness.org.